How is privacy changing the game, and how does it impact the world that you work in?
In terms of the way that Tru Optik operates, it's actually really not going to change anything for us. I think it's actually a positive thing to have more people in the industry be accountable for how data is leveraged. One of the things that we did, we pushed more data into connected TV, buying and selling both programmatic and direct, than any other data management platform or data marketplace. So we knew very early on that privacy compliance was going to be something critical for the future of our entire business, right? So we launched optout.tv 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, to make it possible for consumers to go and opt out and control how data is used against them for interest-based advertising across connected TV. And it's a mandatory part of every contract and partnership deal we've done over the last 2 years. And so for us, it's in terms of when we look at things like CCPA or some of the privacy laws that everybody's worried about, I think we're already past a lot of the expectations that the industry has in the US. Europe, it's a whole other story with GDPR. But I think for us, it doesn't really change anything. It's been more of a focus point and conversation that we're having in discussions, not only with agencies, the TV networks, brands, data providers. I think the focus is a lot more on privacy compliance, but it doesn't really change our business more.
So are many people signing up for the opt-out, or how does that work?
So we'll actually later this year be sharing some public numbers in terms of optout.tv and actually doing a lot more consumer-facing advertising for that as well, along with some of our partners, and some other things that I can't really mention yet. I can't give all the secrets out in advance. But what I will say, even prior to sharing that public number, is that what was really interesting for us is that we've seen is a good percentage, a significant percentage of people that go to optout.tv or opt out or directly from or give data directly on the apps or the websites of our data partners and ad tech platforms. Many people aren't actually opting out at all. They're actually going in and they're adjusting their data. They're giving more information because they understand that, hey, I want to get relevant ads. I don't want to get inappropriate ads, or I don't want to get things that are not relevant to my viewing experience or where I'm at. And so it's interesting that a lot of people are concerned that consumers don't want data to be used. But we're actually seeing that consumers just want data to be used, one, with transparency, two, with privacy compliance and the ability to opt out of it, but three, in a way that actually enhances their experience.
Cool. And I wanted to ask you about identity and data and sort of matching folks and sort of what's important. I don't know how you see the notion of identity.
Yeah. I think identity means different things for different people. I think there's a lot of companies like the device graphs that have done a great job of putting together probabilistic models to understand or have infer what individual there is across a website as opposed to a mobile device or a laptop or a social media site. I think there's a lot of work being done by the big kind of onboarders, whether the TransUnions, Experian, Equifaxes, and others, because they have a lot of PII and being able to map that back for television advertising. And then you kind of have this third level, which I see us, Tru Optik, playing, where we're not really looking at the individual solely, but we're also trying to understand the makeup of the household is. And so where everybody has been talking about a device graph or identity graph for years, I think we were the first to talk about the concept of a household graph. And so when you think about why the household is important for television, is because you may have multiple individuals in a household and you can't be certain which individual is watching the television at one time. And so when we were working with major agencies and brands and advertisers, what they wanted to know with certainty was, well, am I reaching the right type of household? Does this household have an 18 to 34-year-old male in it? Does this household have a consumer that's in market for a car? Or when I talk about frequency capping, who cares on television about frequency capping just to your Roku or just to your Samsung TV? I want a frequency cap in the household. And so I think when we talk about identity, it's really important not to just talk about individual identity, but also being understand the makeup of a household, which is where Tru Optik kind of uniquely sits in the market right now.
Andre, I wanted to ask you about diversity in our industry and some of your thoughts being in it, seeing sort of being at industry gatherings, meeting colleagues. What's your take on the state of things and where you'd like them to go?
Yeah, it's funny because it's not something that ever really talk about. But coming from, I was at JP Morgan before this, prior to that, Ameriprise Financial, and then prior to that in the entertainment industry, which, believe it or not, I would say entertainment as a whole is very diverse. I think everybody knows that. But I would say the finance industry is actually much more diverse than the ad tech or the advertising industry, from my purview, being now in the 6 years from now. And that's something that I was actually surprised to find. I think, there's a lot of companies doing great things in terms of having, chief diversity officers and trying to make an attempt to give, women more leadership roles, more jobs and opportunities for minorities and people of color. I would say at Tru Optik, we don't have that problem. I think, we will never have or need a chief diversity officer. All of our, actually, I was laughing about this earlier, we don't have one VP or SVP in the company that's not a female, right? 35, almost 40% of our engineering team are minorities. Half of our employees are first generation Americans or immigrants. So I think, it comes from the top. It's so built into our DNA and our culture that, and maybe some of those people feel more comfortable applying for jobs and opportunities at Tru Optik because they see who's, is running the company, so they maybe feel like they'll be more accepted or welcome. I don't know what makes us so different than everybody else, but I think as a whole, even a great event like this, at the LUMA event, or any conference that you go to, when you see the senior executive leaders, 85% of the people here today are men, right? And I don't think it's because it's not an inclusive invitation to the whole industry, but when you talk about senior leadership at the ad agencies, at the TV networks, at the ad tech platforms, it's majority men. And then diversity is not something that the industry as a whole has really done a good job of. But I think my hope is that with the success of companies like Tru Optik and others in the industry, that might lead for more opportunities. I understand that a lot of the senior leadership, my hope is, quite frankly, that 3, 4, 5 years from now, just like you hear about the DoubleClick Mafia and the AOL Mafia and the Yahoo and all these companies that I think were so critical to the growth of the ecosystem, say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and those people, the VPs and the directors and the people that were in their 30s then are the senior executives of all these other companies now. My hope is that maybe with companies like mine that are bringing much more diversity into the ecosystem, these will be many of the leaders 10 years out from now, and hopefully I'm doing my part.